Well, welcome everybody to Hawthorn University's webinar series. I'm Paula Bartholomew, and it's my pleasure to facilitate. Today we have Lucinda Curran back, and she's going to be discussing the holistic professional's role in mold and health. And Lucinda's going to present for about 50 minutes, and we'll certainly save time at the end of the presentation for your questions and comments. So just add them at any time during the presentation to the webinar panel, and I'll see them and I'll pose them for you when we have question and answer period. And also, I'll encourage you to keep your eyes on the chat box too. Alex will be posting more details there as we go through the presentation. I think this is really a timely topic because we're experiencing a significant growing awareness of the influence in mold and chronic inflammation. So it's just all the more important to understand our role as health practitioners. And Lucinda Curran's an experienced building biologist and a Chinese medical practitioner, and today she brings us the latest information direct from the field about water-damaged buildings and how they can impact health. And she'll also discuss effective ways to educate and support our clientele. And Lucinda's also developed an assessment tool to help us gather critical details to support our clients that she'll be presenting today as well. Lucinda is the CEO of Eco Health Solutions, and she has a background in health science and education. She has a thorough understanding of ways in which homes and workplaces can adversely affect overall health and vitality. And it's due to her own illness to environmental factors that's her catalyst for supporting others in identifying and finding solutions in order to make healthier living choices. And with a passion to make the world a safer place, Lucinda finds great joy in empowering her clients to enhance their well-being. And she does this through positive changes to the built environment and in their lives. She's the past president of the Australian Society of Building Biologists and is currently involved with the Australian chapter of the Indoor Air Quality Association and the LEAD group. And with a focus on education, she's a trainer at the Australian College of Environmental Studies and has created the Environmental Sensitivities Symposium, as well as a number of other online events to educate and empower the public. So I'm really pleased to have you with us, Lucinda. You're well poised. You have a very strong background on this topic, and so I'm going to turn it over to you now and let you share the information.
Thank you so much, Paula, and especially for that lovely warm introduction. And also a big thank you to Hawthorn University for having me. It's a real honour. So today we're going. Oh, thank you. Today we're going to be talking about mould and health and the holistic practitioner's role. I am going to point out that I have kept my Australian spelling. It's very hard for me to leave the U's out of mould when I'm doing things like this, so I do apologise for that. It's just part of me. So, yeah, there we go. Anyway, learning objectives for today. We're going to be understanding mould and the important role it plays in our environment, become familiar with water-damaged buildings and how they can impact health, become clear on your role as a holistic health practitioner, discover a new clinical tool to assist you in supporting your clients to achieve greater well-being. So the overview, we're going to look at mould and the microbial stew, water-damaged buildings, the role of mould in health, the role of the holistic professional, recommendations to further support your clientele, and a brief introduction to Shoemaker's protocol. So just very briefly, Paula's already told you a lot about me. I think the only thing to add from this list is that I'm a dog and nature lover. So that's who I am. I'm here in Australia. I love working in this area. And according to my friends, I have a very strange fascination with all things building and health. So not surprising, but that's how it is. So looking at mould and the microbial stew. So mould is a microorganism. It's a fungi. So fungi's got a really important role in our whole environment, in the whole world, and we wouldn't be without it. Mould is natural and is a natural and important part of our planet, and one of the main things that it does is it breaks down or decomposes materials like leaves as they fall down in fall, or as we call it here, autumn. So that's a really important role that it plays in the world, and we do need to have it. Because it is natural and it's important, it is everywhere. So there's mould spores absolutely everywhere. But given the right conditions, they can flourish. And what mould needs is moisture and food. Now, food is everywhere, but moisture is really the thing we definitely can control. And we can determine how much of it is in our environments. We can keep our environments clean and clear of it, or we could have it very wet and absolutely perfect for mould to absolutely flourish. Now, I chose this little image or these images to show you because there is what I'm going to call a myth, that the only problematic mold is black. So everybody talks about black mold, the scary, deadly black mold. And it is. There's one type of black mold that is, and it's Stachybotrys nigrum. But it is only one type of mold. And I think what I want to draw your attention to is that mold can be many colors. Mold may not even be visible to the naked eye, but it can still be problematic to health. So don't sort of sit back and rest in the security that it's not black, or that you can't see it. If there's enough information, and I'll guide you through this later, if there's enough information that there's been enough moisture there certainly could be mold there, whether you can see it or not. So mold and the microbial stew. So mold is part of the microbial stew, and that's what we talk about with water damaged buildings. We don't call them moldy buildings, we talk about water damaged buildings, and that's because mold is only part of the problem. So wherever there's mold, there is bacteria, and where there's mold spores, and there is also hyphae. So they're little fragments of mold that break off. And that is, all of those components are part of the microbial stew. So as I said, there's mold spores, there's hyphae, there's bacteria, and there's also mycotoxins. Some molds release mycotoxins, which can be very toxic for people. Not all of them do, but a lot of them do. And there's also microbial VOC, so volatile organic compounds, I'm sure you're already familiar with, but these are microbial volatile organic compounds which are released from the components of the microbial stew. So as a result, even dead mold, which we call unviable mold, can still be a problem. Because mold, there's techniques that were used in the past to deal with mold, which is basically killing the mold, but the mold was never cleaned up, so it was left in the environment, and it was still posing a problem for people, particularly the sensitive and sensitized groups. And therefore, it's absolutely crucial that there's a proper identification of the problem and remediation that's done properly. As I said, there were other techniques used in the past where it's referred to in the industry as spray and pray. That's not acceptable. It's basically where they went in, sprayed an antimicrobial, closed it up and hoped that they'd done the job. And that was it. That was all that was done. So that's not an acceptable way. We've actually got standards on remediation and getting this done properly without causing more problems. So this is the standards that I was referring to. So this is the ANSI and IICRC standard for and reference guide for professional water damage restoration. This is the 3rd edition, so it's 2015. So they actually state here that quantifying visible levels of mold, so that's visible, quantifying visible levels of mold alone is not feasible as an action level decision criterion because it does not take into consideration hidden, concealed, which is not readily visible mold growth, and it does not take into consideration contamination resulting from settled spores that are not visible, that were dispersed from the area of actual growth. So that I'll explain it here. I think I'll touch on it again later as well, but it's really important to understand that any change to mold's environment causes it to spore. It thinks it's under attack. It's like, oh no, there's more or less light or heat or movement of air or whatever. There's something's changed in the environment, so it goes right under attack. The only thing to do here is to create more spores to spread my chance of surviving. So that's what it naturally does. So it's really important to actually do this properly so that you do prevent this cross-contamination. And as a, really want to emphasize that we're not only looking at visible levels of mold, because it's not enough. There is certainly hidden mold and stuff that you can't see, as well as the microbial stew. So mold has become an even greater problem in the built environment because we've got new building codes that are based on energy efficiency. So that's ultimately meant that our buildings are what we call tightly sealed. It's like putting things in a press seal plastic bag or a Ziploc plastic bag and nothing can get in or out. So all the VOCs off gassing for furniture build up in the environment, the fumes from cooking, the scented reeds, the perfumes and fragrances, but also all the moisture. And simply by being in your space, and I'll go through some of the occupant activities, but being in a space, you can be adding a lot of moisture. So just by breathing, perspiring, cooking, bathing, laundering, all of that adds a lot of moisture. And because the building's tightly sealed, it can't go anywhere. So it gets trapped in the space and all those levels of the different contaminants build up. There's also been an increase in the use of fungicides in paint. So that is basically putting something in there to inhibit or prevent mold growth, which to me is really counterproductive because you're not dealing with the cause, you're just band-aiding it or Is that the right word in America? I think that is, but putting like a plaster over it and just hoping that will fix the problem. But what's been the result of that is it's like when we misuse antibiotics and we end up with superbugs. So we've got the equivalent of molds turning into superbugs because of the fungicide use in paints. There's also been poor building practices and improper repairs, and that's a lot of what I see when I'm out in the field. So things like downpipes and gutters being replaced and not being done properly, causing the water to actually get into the building envelope, resulting in a lot of mould and health issues for people. There's been a widespread use of what we call composite wood. So this isn't the beautiful solid wood of days gone by. It's the MDF, it's the chipboard, and it's where they basically grind up wood and then glue it back together with formaldehyde-based glues and then put it out there for us to use. It's usually inside most of our cabinetry these days as well. And for mould, because it's already been ground up, the wood's been ground up, it's like having fast food. It's just really easy to chomp through and set up home in these places. And also you might notice any time it's ever been wet that it gets quite swollen. So there's some clues to look for as well. So water damaged buildings, as I said before, we use that term, not a mouldy building. And that's because of the microbial stew. And so mould needs food and moisture, and we can control the latter. So causes of a water damaged building are things like, and this is just a list of examples, flooding, storm damage or weather events, burst pipes, leaks, blocked gutters, and blocked gutters is quite common. I find in my work, many houses, people aren't cleaning out their gutters very often, so they get full. The rain comes along, it's got nowhere to go, it can't get down through the downpipe, so what ends up happening is it overflows and then gets back into the wall spaces and into the roof cavity as well. And also there's poor building design, which can be a huge contributor to the cause of water damaged buildings. And then poor landscape design as well. So the shape, the topography of the land can be a cause of the water getting in, particularly underneath it, and causing flooding under the house. I can tell you from one of the houses I used to live in, every time it rained, I had an under-house swimming pool. Not that I could get into, but underneath the house just pooled with water every single time it rained. And that's a huge problem. So I'm going to refer to the Australian Building Codes Condensation in Buildings Handbook here, which is from 2014. And this is just to highlight for you some of the occupant activities that can cause the water to damage the buildings. So just having a look at this illustration here. Cooking can create about 5 kilos of moisture per day using a gas appliance. If your actual stovetop is vented to the outdoors, that can add another 3 kilos from, say, boiling and steaming vegetables or pots on the stove. Washing, half a kilo per load of moisture can be added to the indoor air. And then dryers, if they're not vented outdoors, you can create 5 kilos of moisture per load, which is a significant amount. Dishwashing is 1 kilo per day. Bathing or showering, so 6 kilos per day for 4 people in an unvented bathroom. Then just by being in an indoor space, so a family of 4, 5.5 kilograms per day. So whether they're absent, active or asleep for 8 hours each. So that, gives you time to be in and out of the home, be at work, be at school, come back and all of that. And then gas heating, and this is particularly the case if it's unflued. So that can contribute 4 kilograms of moisture per day into the indoor environment, which, as I said, is sealed so tightly now it can't go anywhere. So just by normal everyday living, we're creating a lot of moisture. So the key to preventing mould is to understand that there is a 48-hour window to dry anything that's become wet. So as I said at the beginning, we've got mould spores absolutely everywhere in our built environment, in our world in general. And if it gets wet, if something gets wet, it might be the plasterboard or the, I'm just trying to think of the US term, I'll come back to that one, but the materials you use on the walls, if that's wet for more than 48 hours, you might spill a glass of water on the carpet. If that's wet for more than 48 hours, if you have your carpet steam cleaned or some furniture steam cleaned or the drapes that aren't dried out properly, anything that's wet for more than 48 hours has the opportunity to support or provide what mould's looking for to grow, which is enough moisture. So just a quick summary of what we've covered so far, and this is, I guess, the more building side of things that you're not going to be so focused on. I want to really get into what you can do as a health practitioner, but it's important for you to understand. So not all potentially harmful mold is black, and that's crucial. Mold can be all sorts of colors, mold can be invisible, and it could still be a problem. You do not need to see or smell mold for it to be present. It can be growing within wall cavities. It may be one that you just can't smell. It's not emitting or releasing the microbial VOCs, so you can't smell it, but it doesn't mean that it's not there. Mold doesn't have to be alive to have adverse health effects, so it can be dead, and it could still be impacting on health. Mold is part of the microbial stew, and moisture is the key ingredient, and it can be from external sources or from the occupants. And that lifestyle advice in terms of ventilation and moisture control is vital, and we'll go into that in a little bit more detail later. So the role of mold in health. So I've taken this from Shoemaker's protocol for chronic inflammatory response syndrome. This is the symptom cluster for biotoxin illnesses. So biotoxin being somewhat synonymous with mold in a way. Mold is a biotoxin, so just to put it in that umbrella. So there's a range of symptoms here that are definitely related to people having chronic inflammatory response to a mold exposure. So fatigue, feeling weak, decreased assimilation of new knowledge, aches, headache, light sensitivity, memory impairment, decreased word finding, difficulty concentrating, joint pain, morning stiffness, cramps, unusual skin sensitivity and tingling, shortness of breath, sinus congestion, cough, excessive thirst, confusion, appetite swings, difficulty in regulating body temperature, increased urinary frequency, red eyes, blurred vision, night sweats, mood swings, ice pick pain, abdominal pain, diarrhea, numbness, tearing of the eyes, disorientation, metallic taste, static shocks, and vertigo. So you don't have to have all of these symptoms, but these are certainly ones that are well recognised to have been impacted or been caused by a mould exposure or biotoxin exposure. So that work was from Dr. Richie Shoemaker, who is a US physician, and he's really at the forefront of research into mould and biotoxins in health. And he's developed the biotoxin pathway, which is here. Now, it is incredibly complex, and it's outside the scope of the webinar to go into detail for you, but I've got the link here so you can actually just jump on and grab a copy of that and read through that. As I say, it's too complex to go through now, and I want to keep things really simple because it's such a big topic, and I think overwhelming you means things don't happen. So I want to keep it simple, and I want to empower you, because that's really what, the best thing that you can be in terms of helping your client is to feel empowered. So just looking again for a little summary here for the role of mould in health. So to summarise, so going back to the chronic inflammatory response syndrome that I mentioned, I'll talk a little bit more about this as well. But around 24% of the population have a genetic predisposition to mounting an inadequate immune response to a mould exposure. So that results in basically having a chronic inflammation. And that's what we call in the CIRS, stands for chronic inflammatory response syndrome. So Dr. Shoemaker's work has shown that there's 24%, so about a quarter of the population has this genetic predisposition. So this is the people that I refer to as the sensitive group. So they're the sensitive ones. But also anybody can become mold sensitized. So anybody, whether you're in that group or not, so really it's the other 75% as well as that 24%. You can become mold sensitized simply by being around mold for long enough. So if you're in a moldy workplace, or you going to uni or school where it's moldy, or home where it's moldy, if you're exposed to it for long enough, you can become sensitized to that particular type of mold. So again, apologies for my Australian spelling, but it's just how it is. So we've got the sensitive group, which is the first group, and then the sensitized group, which is the second group. So what I want to point out is that chronic inflammatory response syndrome is not a disease, but it's a state of chronic inflammation. And mold sensitization is a functional impairment. So functional impairment's a term that I discovered to do with electromagnetic electromagnetic fields and their sensitivity that people can end up with. And that's where I first heard about it. But basically, a functional impairment means there's nothing wrong with the person at all, but there's something wrong with the environment. And in the state where it's a functional impairment, if you clean up the environment, all the symptoms go away for that person. Sometimes they'll need a little bit more help, which is certainly the case with mold. They may need a little bit more help from you to get through that, but cleaning up the environment will get rid of that. So neither of these, so either having the genetic predisposition or becoming sensitized, neither of these is a life sentence. So with the support of a skilled health professional, there is hope. So that's you guys. You're all out there doing what you do, working your magic. You have got the skills, you've got the training, and that is so, so powerful. That with this understanding of the background means that you can help your clients significantly. So really focusing on the fact there is hope. So if they've got the genetic predisposition, if they've got the chronic inflammation, that can be brought back down again. If they're sensitized, we can clean up the environment and that'll be sorted. So the role of the holistic health practitioner, an overview of what we're going to do with this. So recognize that there may be an issue with mold, and I'm going to share a tool that I created for you. And from there, once you've done the tool with them, then you'd be deciding from that whether you need to refer on. We're going to remove the source of the exposure or the patient from the source. Create or call on your team, so building biologists, mold remediation professionals, and medical professionals. Recommend appropriate lifestyle and lifestyle changes, supplements, herbs, or treatments. And keep your clients focused on hope. And that last one is so critical, because once people lose hope, they find it a lot more difficult to get well. When they lose hope, the stress creeps in, and as we know, stress is so harmful for health in terms of the cortisol levels and all the rest of that, and the damage that that causes in terms of health. So really, it's so important to keep them focused on the fact there is light at the end of the tunnel and you can help them get there. So the first area, recognizing that there is a potential problem with mold. So one of the key questions to ask is, does your client or patient's health improve when they are away from the building? Or the flip side of that is, when they've been away and they come back, do their symptoms kick back in again? And that's really, really key. So does their health improve when they're away from the building? And the second question, and this is more for you to be asking of yourself, has their health progress plateaued, or are they not responding as you would expect? Because if that's the case, then it suggests that there's something in the environment that's a problem. And then by sorting that out, you can continue with the progress that you would expect to see with these people. So no one expects you to master the area of assessing the harm. So what I've done is created a tool to help you. And this is really to help you identify or recognize that there is a potential problem with mold. So you use the referral for mold assessment tool to determine if you need to refer on for mold assessment and or remediation. It's designed specifically for holistic health practitioners to be used in clinic. It's designed to be super quick and easy to implement and interpret. And it is a simple, effective way to determine if further investigation is warranted. And the other thing I like about it is it's free. So it's not another expensive test to do, which is really, I think, a big struggle for people when their health is on the decline and they're looking for answers, and they've done the rounds and they've done, a whole lot of testing that's really expensive. Having something that's going to help that's free is really important. So using the practitioner tool, so that one that I'm just going to go through, note that all of the questions in the tool are red flags. And we've got a copy that's available, and I noticed that we've already put the link in the chat box for you. But if you go to my website, so ecohealthsolutions.com.au and /MAT, you will be able to get your copy there. So that's Mold Assessment Tool is what that stands for. Okay, so you can grab your copy there at any time, and that's, if it needs updating at any point, that's where it will be when it's been updated as well.
Good to know that it's updated. I'm just going to interject here for a minute. That, you did give us a copy, and so there is a copy of this assessment tool that'll be attached to the recorded presentation after the webinar. So you'll be able to download it from here as well, but it won't be updated continually the way Lucinda will do, but just so you know. Yeah.
Thank you. At this stage, I'm not sure that there'll be any updates necessary, but I always figure any document's organic. So you know, at some stage it may need updating, and that's where I'll update it to, and I'll put the new copies up there. I've got a US version, a US Canada version, which has got recommendations specifically for your part of the world, as well as US type spelling. I did my best. And then I've got an Australian, New Zealand, UK version, which has also got recommendations for our part of the world, because it does need to be area specific. So basically what we're going through with this is this first section, and this is part of the checklist. So it's a 2-page that the client will fill in. This first section, the history section, is absolutely crucial. Any answers for column B or column C for this section warrant a referral for mould, for assessment of water damage, building, and potentially mould remediation of their home. Any of these can signify that there's a significant problem with mould in their home. So has there ever been water issues in the home in terms of leaks, flooding, storm damage, burst pipes, spills, etc.? Column A is pretty much there's no problem. Column B is maybe, and column C is a definite yes. So just to simplify all of that for you. Have your belongings been in a house that was water damaged or mouldy? So that maybe sometimes people are in a rental in between places, and then things get absolutely sodden or covered in mould. Have any materials been wet for more than 48 hours, which, as we talked about, is long enough to support mould growth? Is any part of your home built into the side of a hill? Despite the best attempts to waterproof buildings, I have never found a home in all of my years of doing my work as a building biologist. I've never found a home that is not affected by this, in terms of there will be more water damage in those homes. In the last 12 months, have you noticed visible mould in your home? And in the last 12 months, have you noticed a musty, mouldy, or earthy smell in your home? And that last question is primarily because there's been a lot of research linking mould, like a mouldy smell, to asthma. So even if it's not visible and you can't smell it, and that still means it could be present, these are still key indicators for you in terms of what may be going on. So any answer in column B or C for this section warrants a referral onwards. So then this is the rest of the page. So you've got the history section on the top there, asking about the building. Is there any rotten wood? Have you got a problem with pests? Because generally where there's water damage, there's pests. So that's particularly relevant for termites and rodents, but as well as other pests. And then, do you regularly notice condensation on your windows? And that is a significant one. Sometimes it can be just mild, and that's just due to the temperature variations. You can dry it off and it's no problem. I've been to many houses where there is condensation running off the windows, like not just a little bit, it's literally running down the windows, onto the windowsill, down the wall, every single day, all day, every day. So yeah, it does vary in terms of how severe that's going to be. So it's some of these things that you're going to use your discretion for, and you can obviously talk to them a little bit more about it. Moving on to heating, ventilation and cooling. Do you have gas heating that is not vented externally? So we don't just want an extractor fan or a vent that empties into the roof space. We want that going outdoors, out into the external air, so it's out of the building envelope. Do you have evaporative cooling? Do you service your heating, ventilation and cooling units annually? Do you use humidifiers? And I often find families use humidifiers a lot when their children are sick, not because they find it works, because I always ask them that and they're like, no, I don't think it makes any difference, but somebody's once told them that they need to have a humidifier when the kids are sick. So that obviously is a humidifier. It's adding a lot of moisture and humidity to the air, and it can actually cause a lot of problems. So unless it's necessary, it's best not to be using them. And actually the same applies to the essential oil diffusers with water in them. And I was at somebody's place the other day and we actually pulled theirs apart. It was full of mold. So do be very careful with these things. Cleaning. Do you have a cleaner or housekeeper that uses their own vacuum cleaner and or mop to clean your home? And when you think of the idea of cross-contamination, like that's just almost a no-brainer of like never let someone use a mop or a vacuum cleaner that's been used in another home in your home. Do you steam clean your carpets? And again, if that's been dried quickly, that's no problem. But oft times the carpets will be wet for more than 48 hours, and then it is a problem. Health. Have you noticed that your health improves when you're away from your home, or that you revert to poorer health when you return home? And then just at the bottom, we just total up those columns. This is the second page that they'll be filling in. So this is looking at activities, because remember, a lot of moisture in our homes comes from occupant activities. So do you have gas cooking appliances? Does your kitchen have an extractor fan that is vented externally? How often do you use it when cooking? Does your bathroom have an extractor fan that is vented externally? And again, how often is it used? Do you have a clothes dryer? Does your laundry have an extractor fan that is vented externally? How often do you use it when doing the laundry? How often do you open your windows and doors? Now, I'm a big, airy person. Like, I'd be happy in a tent, you know, or just out in the open. I love air and get really stifled when things are closed up. But I'm really surprised the number of people that never open their doors and windows, ever. They have their heating going in winter, the cooling going in summer, and they never let fresh air in. So that's a huge, huge problem right there. Then, sorry, I just lost my place. How often do you air your mattress? And airing your mattress is simply just pulling the covers back. You don't have to strip the bed, but pull the covers back after you get up and let the mattress dry. Do you have a mattress topper? And the reason I ask that is because if you do, it can actually stop the mattress from drying properly. Does anybody go to bed with wet hair? And do you have gas appliances? Because they contribute a huge amount. So what you do here is subtotal, I can't speak straight, sorry, subtotal that page, carry over your subtotals from the other, work out your totals. Get your client to fill in their name, address, and the date they completed it. And then I've got a box there for you to put your details in there as well. And I'd love you to do that. Like, definitely put your details on it. Make sure people know where to go. Now, then the next 2 pages are information for you. So this is to the practitioner, just to explain that this has been developed for you to work out if mould is playing a role in their symptoms or health concerns. So use it for anybody that you expect may have mould in their home. And as I said before, the beautiful part of this is it's free. So it's no cost to anyone, but it can give you so much information. And that's absolutely crucial with all of this. Always the case history, which is what you're trained to do, trained to take. The case history is so important. So really drawing on your skills, use this to help get the information that you wouldn't normally be asking about, and then meld it all together to get your answers. So the 2 key questions, as I mentioned before, has your client's health plateaued, or are they not responding to your protocol as you would normally expect? And then the second question, does their health improve even slightly when away from home, and or do their symptoms resume upon their return to home? So if the answer to either of those questions is yes, then get them to complete this tool. I think that just makes it really simple. Just, you know, have they plateaued, or are they not responding as they should be? And do their symptoms change when they're away from the home? If either of those are yes, or even both of those are yes, get them to do the tool, and that will give you a lot more insight. From here, I've listed out some of the signs and symptoms of mould exposure according to Dr. Richie Shoemaker, who I mentioned before, and I've got his website there so you can refer back to it as well. And then I've got the instructions, which are really basically very obvious. So have the client complete the tool, so the first 2 pages, complete the subtotals for each page, add them up, and get your totals. And then the guidelines for interpretation are really important. I want you to understand that every single one of those questions can be a red flag to indicate that there's a mould problem. So all of them are red flags. So if you suspect that your client is sensitive or sensitized to mould, then immediate referral for assessment and remediation is recommended if there is any answers in column B or C. If any of your client's answers fall into column B or C in the history section, then immediate referral for assessment or remediation is recommended. So we're looking at immediate referral for assessment from professionals in the area and or remediation, which that will be the next step of it. If they've answered B or C, in columns B or C, if they're either sensitive or sensitized, or you suspect they might be, or they've answered that in the history section. So any answers in that section will indicate that it's a need for referral. If your client is not sensitive or not sensitized, and more than 50% of their answers are in column B or C, then please refer on for assessment and remediation soon. And then D, if your client is not sensitive or sensitized and less than 50% of their answers are in column B or C, then use your discretion as to the speed of referral for assessment and remediation. Having said all this, I will point out that there's interesting statistics around how many buildings are water damaged. In the US, the statistics are around 30% of the buildings. In Australia, the most recent paper that I read about that, which was from last year, said that we've got 40% of our buildings. But when I'm out in my work and when I look back at my life and even just socially going to homes, I think I've only been to one house that wasn't water damaged, and that was because it was 2 weeks old. So I think the figures are actually underrepresenting how many water damaged buildings we do have. So you as practitioner are going to be key in working out what your patient needs so that you can get them well, because obviously that's the most important thing. So this is the last page of it. So it's about building your team and where to refer, because obviously this is a new area and I don't expect you to master it. I think it's a huge, huge area, even for building biologists to get their head around, let alone someone who's, completely focused on the health of the individual. And you don't need to be, get some sort of mastery on this. You just need to be able to have a good team to refer to. So it's important to build your network of reliable and reputable building biologists and mold remediation professionals. Now, I don't have a huge amount of contacts in the States. So what I've done is I've tried to put together a list of places to start. For the Australia, New Zealand one and UK, that I've got a whole lot more there because obviously it's local for me, so it's a lot easier. So in a mold remediation professional, these are the things that you'll be looking for. Have they done a IICRC training? And that's with regards to the standards for remediation that I showed you before. Do they understand the term return a building to condition 1? And if you say that to them and they get all vague on you, then my suggestion is to just run or hang up the phone and get somebody else. What condition 1 means is a pre-damaged state with normal mold ecology. So it's just getting it back to a safe, normal environment. If they don't know what condition 1 means, then be worried. And do they have an understanding of the needs for a mold sensitized person and how to up-level their work for this group? So we've got the standards, the IICRC standards, but then from there, they need to up-level so that they're actually working really carefully for a mold sensitized person. And one thing that I always recommend any of my building biology clients is when they are talking to the mold remediation professional, that they actually say that they are sensitive or they're sensitized, because it means that they should be getting a much more careful job. And so my suggested starting point in terms of finding a mold remediation professional is to go to the Wondermakers Environmental. Now, they're based in Kalamazoo, and they actually train mold remediation professionals who are already qualified, but they teach them about mold sensitized individuals. So they're actually really focused on this really sensitive group and creating awareness and making sure that they're actually cared for properly. So that would be my go-to point. I haven't forewarned them that they might get a whole lot of calls, but I'd certainly go and have a look at their site, find out practitioners that they've trained, and get people in your area as part of your team. Now, medical practitioners, you may or may not, depending on your actual modality, you may need to include these people in your team. So Dr. Richie Shoemaker trains medical practitioners in his protocol for treating people who've had biotoxin or mold exposure. So it's really recommended that you actually find a physician who's had his training. So if you go to survivingmold.com, you'll be able to find people there. And also, functional medicine practitioners are likely to be much more informed or aware of mold-related health issues. So even if you haven't got someone through Richie Shoemaker's site because there's nowhere nearby, I'd be certainly asking questions in the functional medicine fraternity and see who you can find that way. And then the last bit just to point out is that this is a tool that I've created, and I created it for you to use freely. I want you to use it, but it is copyright. It's my intellectual property, which I'm happy to share with you. So I've created it. I'm a building biologist, Chinese medicine practitioner, and CEO of EcoHealth Solutions. You have permission to use it as it is without alterations, and be sure to provide pages 1 and 2 in their entirety to your client. Definitely put your contact details on it and the space provided. You don't have permission to copy or adapt it without proper acknowledgement, and I've just given an example of how you might want to do that. But basically, it is there for you to use as it is, and really it covers off so much, and it's really a great summary of all the training and experience I've had with building biology and mold assessment, water damage building assessment as well. So, I mean, I doubt you'll need to change it. As I said, if it needs updating, this is where it will be on my website, so ecohealthsolutions.com.au/MAT, mold assessment tool, MAT, and that's where it'll be updated. I've got the version at the bottom there, so version 1, and it's the US Canada copy that I'm showing you here. So the role of the holistic practitioner as well, after we've done that assessment, is to remove the source of the exposure or the patient from the source. So this is like throwing them the life buoy. So for a sensitive or sensitized person, this is a vital first step. It's impossible for them to recover and stay in the same environment. So it's like, you know, someone who's got anaphylaxis to peanuts, you don't keep them around peanuts. You know, it's just one of those things. Of course you don't. You've removed the source, or you remove the person from the source of it. So they either need to stay elsewhere, or their home needs to be assessed and remediated. And often when that's happening, they shouldn't be around for that as well. Also, create or call on your team. So you need a building biologist who's going to be the first person going out on site to discover what's happening. Also, a building biologist could be looking at electromagnetic fields, other factors with indoor air quality, other contaminants like drinking water, heavy metals, all sorts of different things. So a building biologist is the first person. A mold remediation professional, you may or may not find someone of your own, but a building biologist should be able to recommend someone for you. And also medical practitioners. So this step is obviously in conjunction with the previous one, with using the tool, as the home needs to be assessed by a professional in the field. The scope of work needs to be produced and implemented. So I'm just racing through this because it's probably not that relevant for you. And all the while you and potentially the medical professionals are supporting your client. So it's all about teamwork and helping your client feel buoyed in all of this and being supported. So in terms of the lifestyle and building, so we're looking at ventilation. So this is advice that you'd be giving them. Open your windows and doors, get the fresh air in, change the air over at least twice a day. Look, the ideal is every hour. And simply opening several windows and doors means you can change the air over completely in 2 minutes. If you've got the window just open a little bit, it could take 60 minutes. Moisture control, so using those extractor fans, you might want to look at dehumidifiers, and certainly air purifiers as well can be significant in helping them be in that space. So in terms of their lifestyle, looking at their inner environment, so making sure their hope is alive and well, you know, feeding that, because they need to know that they can and will get better with your help. And also, if we're addressing the cause, then, you know, the sky's the limit. You know, there's no limit to how well and vibrant they can become. The thoughts and beliefs, stay positive, trust that they can recover. Inflammation can be reduced and functional impairments can be rectified. You just fix the environment. But one key thing with this is to avoid hypervigilance. And so that's getting really freaked out and paranoid about tiny details and getting really stressed about that. And I do see that a lot. So do keep on top of that side of it with them. Sorry, that one should say meditation, not mediation. And that's going to be really important in terms of keeping calm and, you know, the feel-good hormones, not to be complex here. Resting, and then forest bathing, which is basically going out and spending time in nature. And from the research that I've seen about this, the effects of spending 1 hour in a forest, which is the forest bathing, the effects of that last for a week. So if you did that once a week, you've got that beautiful, you know, healing happening for you. And also, I think part of why that's so effective is in the forest, the trees are going to be emitting natural antimicrobials because they need to survive all the mold in the environment, which is there to break down the leaves that have fallen. So if you even think about it that way, just being amongst the trees and breathing that in and just feeling healed is fantastic. Other places, you know, would be equally wonderful, would be sitting on the beach, being by the ocean. Dietary changes. So in terms of Chinese medicine, mold is a damp pathology. So avoid cold and damp foods. So wheat, dairy, sugar, ice cream, bananas, and tropical fruits, and physically cold foods and drinks. Include pungent foods, things like spices, because they can actually pierce through the dampness and transform it. And include some bitter foods such as arugula and watercress. And in terms of other ways to look at this, so avoiding moldy foods, avoid fungus, mushrooms, peanuts, alcohol, and other fermented foods. Now, Mercola lists out these dietary recommendations, and it's to avoid alcoholic beverages, wheat and all wheat products, which we touched on, rye, peanuts, cottonseed and cottonseed oil, corn, barley, sorghum, and sugar cane and sugar beets, all of that, and hard cheeses. I've got the link there at the bottom if you want to go and have a look at the whole article that came from. And then keep an eye out for food sensitivities, intolerances, and allergies. I always find that people who are sensitive in some way become sensitive or are sensitive in other ways as well. So keep an eye on that. Avoid inflammatory foods. Be mindful and teach your clients to trust their body. So just wanted to comment on a case study. I had this client who called me out for a mold exposure that he'd had, and he was like, it was like he was on fire. He was sweating and he was boiling and everything was hot and heat. And his practitioner had told him to take turmeric and black pepper, which we know that's a great anti-inflammatory. However, from a Chinese medicine point of view, it's very, very heating. And so he said, you know, should I be taking it? What should I do? It's like, well, look, I'm not your practitioner. I'm your building biologist. But I will ask you, how do you feel when you take it? And he said, it just makes me worse. Like I'm sweating even more. And he just went into all the symptoms that he had, and they were all heat related. So just be mindful of that and really teach your clients to trust their body, because nobody knows them better than themselves. So you give them the tools and help them. And reducing other environmental stresses is also important. So eat organically, go fragrance-free, avoid wireless technology, including Wi-Fi, and they definitely impact on sleep. And sleep is a brilliant healing time. It's when we're creating and producing melatonin, which is so important for our healing. So at least if people have got those in their environments, turning it all off at bedtime at the very minimum is going to be helpful for them. Cook in stainless steel, ceramic or glass, so not the non-stick. Drink filtered water and avoid plastics for drinking, food storage, etc. And in terms of supplements, herbs and treatments, I really want you to be informed by your modality. We've all got different training and we've got different ways to approach it. So use your amazing skills that you have. Trust your instincts and teach your client to trust their body and inform you, because it's really a lot about teamwork. It's all about teamwork. And then other things to look for, so other potentially related conditions, candida overgrowth and other yeast infections, skin conditions, rhinitis, asthma, respiratory tract conditions, and brain fog. And keeping your client focused on hope is vital. So if they have a genetic predisposition to not coping with the exposure to mold, remind them that inflammation is the result and inflammation can be managed. If they become sensitized, the environment can be managed. Stress, worry, frustration are going to increase inflammation. So, you know, really bring them back to hope and keep them focused on that. And so just a summary on that. So recognize that there may be an issue with mold. So using the tool that I created, the mold assessment tool, and then refer on. Remove the source of the exposure or the patient from the source. Create or call on your team, so the building biologists, mold remediation professionals, and medical professionals. Recommend appropriate lifestyle and lifestyle changes, supplements, herbs, and treatments, and also dietary, that should be in there as well, sorry. And keep your client focused on hope. Now, I want to briefly introduce you to Shoemaker's protocol, and as I said before when I showed you this other image, it's incredibly complex, as you can tell, at least by that. I mean, it's clear and it makes sense, but it is complex. So I'm going to take you just through a couple of the basics in terms of the protocol. So I've shown you this image already with the biotoxin symptoms cluster, and that's part of the diagnosis of chronic inflammatory response syndrome. So they need to have 6 of the symptom clusters listed in terms of, you know, is it then worth doing the workup, and 8 symptoms clusters is consistent with biotoxin illnesses. You've got the history of consistent biotoxin exposure in water damaged buildings, or the toxigenic blue-green algae, tick bites, consumption of reef fish, etc. The visual contrast sensitivity test I want to talk about here. So that's used by Shoemaker as part of the diagnostic tools, and you can do that at vcstest.com or survivingmold.com/1 on screen online screening test. And what that is doing, it's looking at the eye's ability to actually see the difference in lines. It's not whether you can read or not, it's just looking at whether you can see a contrast, and that's actually been found to be related. Now, I find it incredibly useful to plot the changes during and after mold exposures. So you might get them to do it before their home's remediated, once they're out of the home, once they're back in a clean home, and then, you know, periodically thereafter, and you can plot the changes that are going on for them and make sure it's all actually, you know, as it should be, it's been sorted properly. So in terms of the protocol, there are 12 steps. I'm just going to race through 4 of them and just explain a little bit about them, because I think the first 4 are probably the ones we'd be more likely to delve into as holistic health practitioners, whereas the other side of it then gets into much more medical practitioner side or physician. So step 1 is to remove the client from the source of the exposure. Now, he recommends that a test for mould called an ERMI test, so it's the Environmental Relative Mouldiness Index, is used. And there are a lot of limitations with the ERMI test. And I actually don't recommend that you do that at all. It is an expensive test. It's a test that's there's a few levels to go in at. You do need to know how to interpret it, but then the way it's used, as in for an individual house, it's not actually suitable. So what I would recommend you do, so I've got his recommendation just in normal. I've italicized my comments on this. I would rather that you use the mould referral tool and that you use that to determine whether it's appropriate, to get the professionals to come in and assess it. I run into this a lot here in Australia. A lot of practitioners are doing the ERMI and using that to determine whether they need to get the house assessed for their client or not. It's an unnecessary step. It's not useful because it doesn't show where the source of the mould is. There's lots of problems with it. It doesn't show the source of where it is. It's not helpful in terms of it doesn't show if there's active or current mould growth. So it does give us some history, but it doesn't actually break it down for us. So what we look for are all of the moulds that are there. We're looking for the spores, the hyphae, because they actually tell us whether there's current active mould growth. So there's lots of factors around that. I've got lots and lots of research papers and things on the way ERMI is meant to be used, and it's been designed as a research tool to compare, say, a group of 50 buildings to another group of, say, 50 buildings, not as a one-off. And the score you get at the end is based on a calculation that hasn't actually been proven to work. And I think the other thing that's important to point out is originally the ERMI test was based on vacuuming 2 square meters of carpet in the bedroom and the living room, and using then that as the parameter, as it's like a constant in every house, to then compare to each other. Given there's many houses that don't have carpet, there's now a Swiffer wipe that you can wipe a certain number of surfaces to get that information. That was never part of the original methodology, and it is actually completely unproven at this point. So be very mindful of this. As I say, it's an expensive test. Interpretation is a tricky thing. I would much rather you use the free tool that I've given you and then refer on to the appropriate professionals, because really the first step with a water damage building assessment is a visual inspection, and then we're using a whole lot of different tools to assess what's going on, to have a look what's going on, and testing is only a very minor part of it. So I would encourage you, don't try to have mastery over this. It's a huge area. People do specific training in it. They do the equivalent of a PhD in it to get a full understanding. So refer on, let them deal with it. You know, let the people who've got that mastery deal with that side of it, and you focus on the health side of it. So step 2 is to reduce the circulating biotoxin. So I'm going to suggest using binders to conjugate and remove the toxins. Step 3 is to remove the biofilm dwelling, the staphylococci that keeps the melanocyte stimulating hormones low, and that's a test that he recommends, the Marcon's test. Eliminate further inflammation, and he suggested to eliminate gluten, which is what I talked about before, as well as watching, and it's my suggestion, watch for other food sensitivities. Now, there are 12 steps in total, and as I said, it gets much more medical practitioner based. There's the link for you if you'd like to go and read much more about it. It's an incredible process. He's had excellent results from it, and obviously training a whole lot of physicians and health practitioners to use his protocol. So just to remind you that the role of the holistic health practitioner is to recognise that mould may be a problem. So use the tool that I gave you and refer on as needed. Keep your client absolutely focused on hope. It's so important. If there's a genetic predisposition, inflammation can be managed, and if they're sensitised, the environment can be managed. Minimise other environmental stresses, including becoming fragrance-free. and recommend appropriate dietary changes, supplements, and nutrition. And given it's such a complex area, you may feel the need for more support. And I'd like to offer anybody who's interested a free 30-minute exploration call if you would like some support on this. So what we'll do is we'll work out where you're at, we'll work out where you'd like to be, and then I'll share a strategy with you that you can implement right away to get there. So if you'd like to take or make the most of that offer, I'd encourage you to do so, because I really do want to make a difference in people's health and well-being, and particularly in your role as a practitioner. And I think even talking about all of this stuff stirs up a lot for people individually. So, you know, you stepping out of practitioner for a moment, having those realizations that you might even have a problem as well. So either way, as a practitioner or as an individual, if you would like to take me up on that, go to ecohealthsolutions.com.au/your call. So Paula?
I'm right here. Thank you so much. And what a generous closing you just gave us. Thank you.
Oh, that's my pleasure. As I say, I just want to make such a difference. And, you know, it is a tricky area. So, you know, if I can help in any way, I'm here.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we have some questions. Are you ready for that?
Sure.
All right. One of the things that came up here today in this office, I had some gallon jars that I'd used recently when I went to an event that I'd filled with water, and I came back with two of them, one full, one half full, two that I had used but didn't let air dry. So they still had just drops in there, but nothing more than that. So I was in them today, and I noticed that the one that was full and half full was fine. One of them that was empty was as well, but the other one had mold in the bottom of it, a couple mold spots. And this was because it hadn't air dried, but it surprised me, because what's the difference between 10 drops of water in a jar versus a half a gallon or a gallon of water in a jar, and being able to maintain a mold-free environment? Or could it not be mold-free? I just can't see it in the other one.
Well, just go back to the environment first off. No environment's going to be mold free, but we want to get a normal mold ecology. And in terms of the bottles, I would suggest that perhaps the ones that had been partially or somewhat or even completely drunk but still had a few drops in it, there may have been other contaminants in there which you know, provided the food for the mold to grow as well. I'm not exactly sure of the best answer there, but I'd certainly encourage you to give it a good scrub out with, you know, a good scrubbing brush, some detergent and water. And the other thing I should mention too, vinegar is not a good thing to be cleaning mold with. And what I found a whole lot of research papers that looking into the microbial effects or antimicrobial effects of different essential oils, and oregano is one of the best ones. So that's usually what I give most of my clients when I go out on site. They need a little bottle of oregano oil and a hygrometer so they can keep a check on their humidity levels. But if you mix up a solution of detergent and water with a few drops of oregano oil, give it a good clean out, rinse it all out properly, and then let it dry, that should actually be okay, given that it's a non-permeable surface.
Okay, thank you. And then a question about dead mold. You're saying that it's still in the environment, but it can be an issue for some. Why would it be an issue if it's dead?
Okay, good question. So dead mold, unviable mold, all it means by it being dead is it's not creating any more spores. But if it was one that produced mycotoxins, which are incredibly toxic for people, that the mycotoxins will still be there. It will also have broken, like have hyphae, which are little fragments that break off, that will still be there. And the mold itself can be problematic. So by not actually removing it, it's not actually removing the problem. You may stop it from getting worse to a point, but if you're sensitive or sensitized, you don't want that lying around. So one of the best strategies is to be using a microfiber cloth, because it picks up, like it's actually designed to pick up stuff. I don't, it's one of those double dipping rules with the microfiber cloths. You make up that lovely detergent, water, oregano oil solution. You don't double dip the cloth. You use it once and you throw it away. So we've got hardware stores here that have big bags of El Cheapo kind of microfiber cloth. So, you know, cut them up into smaller pieces, use them as you need to, and just throw them away as you go.
So cloth rags that had been used to clean mold cannot be washed themselves if you put them in a washing machine that say got to 140 degrees and you put the oregano oil in with the soap. Would that work?
I wouldn't be relying on it.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't rely that it's safe. There is always going to be that risk. Some molds don't need much moisture. Some molds are pretty good at high temperatures. So, it would really depend. I wouldn't guarantee that, whereas if you're starting afresh, you're not going to be spreading anything around.
Uh-huh. We had a very wet winter here in California this year, and particularly up in the Pacific Northwest. We got 200 inches in 6 months here.
Wow.
And yeah, it's significant. But a number of people had moldy vehicles because it was just relentless raining. And so I've talked to a number of people that have dealt with their vehicles, and one of the things that they used was an ozonator. Once it was entirely cleaned, that they weren't able to visibly see it, they closed it up completely with an ozonator, and then even turned the vehicle on so that the venting system, the air and heat, circulated through, so it drew the ozonator in through that into all the nooks and crannies. Any thoughts on ozonators or situation like moldy cars?
Yes. So I am not a fan of anything that produces ozone because it's not what we should be doing in our environment. It's harmful for health. It fits into the spray and pray methodology. And it doesn't, unless it's actually physically, unless you've got some process where you're physically removing the mold, as we've just been talking about, it can still be a problem. So the other factor of running the air conditioning or heating system and getting everything through it makes me just freak out, going, oh my gosh, cross-contamination, it's in the system now, and that needs to be remediated as well. So usually when we're looking at houses, the heating, ventilation and cooling systems are the last things to be cleaned and remediated because they're so easy to contaminate. So I would not feel confident in that as a methodology. You would need to be cleaning off the surfaces, like we said, with the detergent water solution, the oregano oil, microfiber cloths, drying everything, HEPA vacuuming all the surfaces, and then washing it all down again, drying it all out completely. And if you have run the air conditioning or heating, then it may be worth getting that checked. You can hire air scrubbers. So that's like a really, I guess, a fancier kind of air purifier that's actually designed to take mold spores and mold components out of the air. And that would be probably through a mold remediator or mold remediation professional. So, yeah, I would be looking at that level to actually clean it out. I had a friend who had exactly that same issue, and it was one of the main steps that she did to clean it out as well.
So in bringing up air purifiers here, it's one of the questions. Do you have any recommendations on one that will actually kill the bacteria and the mold circulating into the air?
Okay, so no, not to kill it. What I always look for in an air purifier is that it's got a HEPA filter, because then that's removing the particles from the air down to 0.3 microns, which is really important. So that will capture a lot of the mold. I like the activated carbon filters inside them because that absorbs a lot of the odor. So we're going down to the fume level. And then the other part that I would look for is that it's got some sort of silver membrane in it, which is a natural antimicrobial. It's not going to guarantee that it's all completely clean. If you're running an air purifier or a dehumidifier in a moldy environment, you are going to need to change the filters more frequently. Just like if you're using your vacuum cleaner with a HEPA filter to vacuum surfaces, those filters need changing more often as well.
You also talked about the humidifiers being moldy inside. You know, these are plastic units, and we've seen with the research that came out, you know, first around the Krupp's coffee maker, and then I just started opening anything. And so I was with my family recently, and I pulled open the kids' sippy cups, and inside the sippy sucker part of the sippy cup, it was all black mold. And the thing had only been, you know, they'd only had it for 2 weeks, and they've run it through the dishwasher, but still it's an indicator of things that never dry.
Yes,
and
definitely.
that are not checked.
And I think that's another good point too, is if it's just being run through the dishwasher, you're not doing that hand cleaning. You know, if you're actually washing up, you know, doing the dishes, you tend to notice those sorts of things far more. And you know, to get the little scrubby brush in there and give it a good clean and all of that. So I think it's all about being really quite aware. I mean, there's a whole lot in terms of, you know, occupant behavior that can change things in terms of if you focus on one room every month, or sorry, every time you clean. So basically you'd rotate through the house, you'd pull out all the furniture, clean in behind it, you'd be checking things, and also you'll catch things more quickly if there is a problem. So it's all about being aware without becoming hypervigilant and being really proactive with this. And, you know, if you've got a leak or you know, some sort of water's getting in somewhere, fix it straight away and then get it dried out as well. So there's lots of things you can do.
This listener is saying that she does not have an externally vented any kind of venting in her shower and in the bathroom, so she always leaves the windows open, but worries about it when it's cold and raining outside, if it's actually doing any good.
Good point, and that's exactly right. It's a good area to be worried about, because that is the case. When it is wetter outside, that humidity will come inside. So what I recommend, and this is often for people who are renting as well, where you can't actually make those structural changes, that's a really good role for a dehumidifier. So often when I recommend dehumidifiers, it's to dry out a space. But then once you've done that, you've got a dehumidifier sitting there, you take it off into the bathroom or the laundry and you use it every day. And it is astonishing how much water, I mean, we keep our doors and windows open when we're bathing, which is not the greatest thing in the world to do. But, you know, in terms of the airflow, we've got all our doors and windows open, so it's freezing here at the moment. It's boiling in summer. But we run the dehumidifier every time we bathe, and we get litres and litres of moisture every single week. Yeah. So that's a good strategy.
Okay. Yeah. Another question, you're saying that since mold is naturally occurring, is it always dangerous?
No, it's not always dangerous. If you're a sensitized person, there'll be particular ones that will trigger your symptoms. If you're a sensitive person, some molds, I mean, even at a more natural level, it can be a problem. In terms of what they do with health, even this particular species within a genre, so, you know, we might say Stachybotrys, which is, you know, commonly associated with black mold. Stachybotrys nigrum is the black mold, but there are other types of Stachybotrys, and they all have different health effects. So there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of species, and they all have different health effects. And it would be, you know, if somebody's got the predisposition or they're a bit weak, you know, could be an opportunistic situation as well in terms of it causing symptoms. If things are at a normal level and it's sort of matching up with what's outside, it should be okay for most people.
Yeah, I just see, you know, some sensitive people, especially when we get into autumn, when leaves start falling and it gets a little bit more damp and things start molding naturally, that they get more reactive. Yeah. So this listener says that we've all moved from home to home over time. So when we transfer personal items or furniture from water-damaged homes, do we potentially contaminate our new environment?
Potentially, yes. Yeah. So the thing to think about is most things can be remediated. The cost of remediation can get ridiculous. So like if you've got a book, for instance, and you want to remediate it, they have to literally HEPA vacuum every single page.
Exactly.
So it's very labor intensive. So oftentimes those sorts of things are better off being replaced. If it's something non-porous, that's easy. You just wipe it. It's done. So, you know, back to the microfiber cloth. So it is the possibility of doing that, and it is something to be mindful of, and especially if it's sensitive or sensitized people, it's, you know, be aware of it without becoming hypervigilant.
Okay. All right. One of our callers has been dealing with these kind of things for a long time and has studied this, and she's talking about a practitioner in the United States, Dr. Neil Nathan. I don't know if you're familiar with him, Lucinda.
No,
he's a mold Lyme expert, and he works remotely with many mold toxic patients, and he uses real-time laboratories for suggesting that it's a good testing lab for Lyme toxicity, and then immunolytics.com for testing your home and workplace is also suggested by him.
That's great. I mean, if you've got people there, then I mean, please share that with everyone, because, you know, I'm limited with who I know in the States.
No, thank you. And thank you, Rhonda, for this. She's saying that real-time laboratories tests for different types of mold, black mold, gliotoxins or yeast, aflatoxins, and acrotoxin.
Great. Yeah, I mean, one of my hesitations is usually when people are doing the rounds, which is what they tend to do. When I say doing the rounds, it's like they go from health practitioner, medical practitioner, whatever. They're doing, one after the other because they're not getting answers. They've already spent sometimes thousands or tens of thousands of dollars on testing. And that's why I thought, if I could create something that's easy for you guys to use, that you just, you get an indication, you refer on to the right people and you can sort it quickly. That's always my preference. And I think because I'm a Chinese medicine practitioner too, I'm not that inclined to do testing because we've got our own system. Obviously, we're all different modalities, so you've got to use what you know and what you trust.
Sure. But I think, using a questionnaire like that to get a first level of assessment is good. And then we're always stuck in the place of a competent professional to bring in after that, and if they're competent. So we need to find our resources, and we don't always have them accessible to us. But no, I had a client years ago that had just mystery. She'd seen so many people. She was really going downhill and sick, and I kept coming back to dental. And she'd had a root canal, and indeed there was an infection in her jaw, and it took a long time. But once that was resolved, things really started turning around for her. But then there was also her home. They'd had water damage in the home, and it took time to get the correct people, and a lot of money spent later. But she recovered her health from those 2 points of fixing the issue with dental and fixing her home.
That's fantastic to hear. And I think that's the whole point of all of this is, if you hit a point, it's like the glass ceiling and you just can't get them beyond it, then there's something else that's just playing into it. And if you can sort that out for them, I mean, gee, the joy of getting your life back. I know from when I was incredibly sick I was actually incredibly chemically sensitive. I would get anaphylaxis from someone walking past outside with perfume on. And people always said to me, and you hear it all the time, as long as you've got your health, I didn't have my health, but I had my hope. And that's why I'm really pushing this side of it with you all, keep the hope alive for people, because that's what gets them through, that belief that they can get better and that they're in your hands, they're in capable hands.
Yes. And in my hands, I could get her to the professionals that she needed and direct her out. She had to, because she was in another state for me to find that, but I helped her. But for my role, I really worked to support her attitude as well as her immune system and her detox pathways. Certainly working with diet and lifestyle suggestions, but there was the very important work that I knew how to do and that I could bring to the table for her. Keep her steady.
The bit that you mentioned, which I think is so key, I think as practitioners, we want to have all the answers and we want to do everything ourselves. There's some things we can't. And by referring on, you were doing exactly the right thing. I mean, it's such a hard thing to do when you really want to be the person that finds all the answers for them. But it is doing that for them by handing them to the right people. All I
could lend was my intuition. It's like you need a competent dentist. And she went through 3 dentists until they identified the infection and worked on it, and a number of different remediators also until somebody was really competent. And so I want to thank you so much for this presentation, because you're really informing us on a deeper level of the work that we can do and what needs to happen in terms of working within relationship with other health professionals.